everyone. I'm really happy to be in presence with you today. It's really, really beautiful to see you all in person for once. So let's get started because I have a lot of things to show you. So this presentation is about design systems, but to introduce the topic, I really want to start with talking about the Split movie, which very likely most of you have seen, because it's a good analogy to understand what we are talking about, what is the problem we are trying to solve here. So the Split movie is about Kevin, who actually has an identity disorder problem. And basically, he has 24 different identities that basically just take the control over him in a seamless way. So you don't know who you're talking with at any given moment. And so this effect also can manifest in digital systems, in digital products, when actually you see something that is inconsistent and that is always shifting and changing in such a way that you cannot recognize a real identity in the product you're observing. And this can usually be discovered with interface inventory. Here we see the interface inventory done on a website, just checking the icons used, so just iconography. And you can see that in this case, this is a real case, there is huge inconsistency in the sense that things that are proposed here are really different. So the inconsistency can also manifest itself in styling. Again, here we have an inventory with a lot of styles for tabs, for buttons, and even if you focus on the last column, this is always a single website, mind you, the very same button with the very same label can have in that site, in that website, 4 different stylings for the same button, same label. Colors are also a problem that can be like manifesting the split effect in a system. In this study, which was kind of the first step of a huge redesign from a designer, Ryan Lamb, so courtesy of him, we have this example where he actually checked that there were 95 unique text colors. And imagine that 103 unique background colors in a single website. So we are talking about this. And now, I want to tell you that there is much more to inconsistencies than just styling and superficial aesthetics, because there are systems that actually exhibit the split effect even in the functional patterns. So here you can see like a date picker. Here you have another, here you have another, then another one, another one, another one, and another one. And this is the same system, the same product, and one that some of you may also recognize, to be honest, but I won't say, who's the guilty here. But anyway, the catch is styling inconsistencies are relatively easy to spot and to fix because at the end of the day, it's most CSS styling, right? But when you're dealing with functional inconsistencies, those are really, really subtle because can manifest in very high-level usage patterns, like, for example, the treatment of a workflow or something like that. So they are not as easy to spot and not as easy to fix. So this, in the end, creates brand and product inconsistency, high cognitive load, which is the most dangerous thing that we can do to our product, because at the end of the day, a low cognitive load is a proxy to a perception of high value. High value. If you have high cognitive load, so there's a stress using your product, automatically you are transmitting an idea of low credibility of the product and low value. It is a bias that we have. So in general, we have pure UX if you're not able to control the split effect. So enter design system. Design systems are not anything that's new, we might say, because they exist really from a lot of time. Because even magazines and newspapers are using their own design system in order to communicate the structure of the page, the language that they use in order to convey that easy, recognizable elements of their structure that makes everything very, very low cognitive load, right? Because we are always recognizing the same language, the same visual language, right? So they all have existed since, you know, the start of the humankind, we can say, in a form or another. But design systems as a term has been coined around 2014 in order to just describe all the good habits, procedures, process, and methodology that actually can help us to achieve this result, especially for digital systems. So what is a design system? Let me give you a very high-level definition saying that it is based on the integration on three main pillars: the graphics, the code, and the guidelines, in something that is really systemic, it's really integrated. It's at the core of this idea is the idea that you cannot just throw a bunch of components and just pretend that people then will be able to mount their drawer like that. So usually IKEA is providing an instruction manual to enable you to actually build up your drawer from the bare components. And this is the very idea, to have something that integrates all the guidelines that actually creates a framework to respond to complexity in a coherent way. So if we look more closely to the common elements, the ones that are very typical in the design system, I've represented them like in a stack because I really wanted to convey the message that they really are built one on top of the other, in the sense that one is just using the principles of the previous layers in order to create complex behaviors, progressively complex behaviors and richer information. So we have the guidelines, and then we have tools and resources. These are the two main, let's say, elements of a design system. But we will see each element one by one in order to understand really and truly what they are. Just let me say that guidelines are usually organized in a documentation that is clearly structured and can be navigated to easily find what you need at any given time. So in order to see this well in detail, I'm using Atlassian design system as an example, because it is a fairly self-contained, small, clear, and structured design system that is a very good starting point to learn what a design system is. So here you can see, this is the principal rules piece of our stacked architecture, so it's the very foundation of everything. And it basically serves the purpose of answering these two very important questions. Which is the purpose and soul behind our products, or our product, if it's only just one, and which are the core values and principles that actually should guide users and contributors of the design system, right? So it creates a framework, let's say, in a way, because you have these general principles that should guide you, that should inform all your decisions when you're working on the product. On top of that, there's the style guide. This is an element we are all very familiar with, and even without a design system, usually every company has a style guide, hopefully, right? Even a static one in the form of a PDF, but it doesn't matter. What is a style guide at the core? It is what defines the skin and the look and feel of the product or the family of products, if it is an ecosystem, right, of digital products. Typically, it includes grids, accessibility, colors, icons, rules for imagery, motion. So it can be very rich, depending on the need, of course, of the product and the company. On top of that, we can have the content guide. The content guide is what defines the product's interface copy. So the language, the tone, the way we want to communicate with our final users, even with the microcopy. So this is really important in order to basically make our products really close to our users, according to the values that we have, of course. So we can use a register that's very friendly, or we can be very formal. It all descends from the core values of the company. It is consistent with that. And then now here starts to become a little bit more interesting as we enter the patterns guide. So the patterns guide is where we define the functional patterns as opposed to perceptual, right? all that is included in the style guide. We can talk about those patterns as perceptual patterns. Everything that goes in the patterns guide here is more related to the functional bits. So it can contain the UI patterns and components that are needed to build the product consistently. But the very interesting thing is that here we start to talk about the atomic design methodology. Because you can see here that already in the ADS, the Atlassian Design System, this portion of the design system is split in two. You have components and you have patterns. This reflects the fact that there is an hierarchy of functional patterns that proceed according to the atomic methodology. What is the atomic methodology? It's a very simple concept at heart. It's that you start by defining core elements that are very simple. I like the words of your language, in a way. And then you can use, by composition, those elements to create progressively more interesting and more powerful constructs. Like the analogy is, from atoms we go to molecules, then to organisms, and so on. If we want to visualize it for digital products, this is kind of the analogy. You start from icons, from buttons, from the component that you have to show an image, and then from that, you build the molecules that are a grouping already, a composition of one or more of these elements into something more complex, and then you build up complexity from then on. And this is very powerful, because first of all, it embeds consistency. Because at the end, what it does is that you are always using systematically the same elements to build up complexity and to build up flexibility. Because by mounting together, compositing all these individual elements, you start to create something that's very flexible and that's very expressive, in the sense that it can support a wide variety of needs for your users and your product in the end. And this can be flexible, meaning that the level of abstraction that you need, the level of hierarchy that you need in order to be useful, in order for this system to be useful, can be adapted to your needs. Now, of course, the general idea is just to have foundations, components, and patterns, okay? And this is the approach followed by public design systems, right? Because they are public, so they need to cater to a wide variety of audiences and needs. But say you want to develop your own design system because you have a very specific application suite to implement. Like, for example, what if I want to build the Adobe suite? Okay, maybe I won't ever do that, but they use very specific patterns. It's not like they can use Material UI, right, and adopt that to just bring those patterns in their system, in their design system. They need to create something that really can serve their purposes, and maybe they will adopt this app structure, so they will be defining features, right? How do you do, for example, the drag and drop or the selection of inside an image, the famous, ants marquee or something like that. So they will define these patterns, right? They will define features that are specific to their domain, okay? So this must be flexible. But let's say that in general, it's okay to have components and patterns. So let's have a look at them, more, a closer look. So components and patterns, what's the difference? Components are those basic UI elements that we were talking about. Buttons, an accordion, a table, whatever, all these kind of very basic components that usually are already available in a UI component library. Right? So this level, let's say, it's interesting, but only up to a point, because we are very lucky. We live in 2021, and these things are very consolidated. So the good news is that even if you switch from Material UI to another component library, to Bootstrap, I don't know, or something else, you will find that there are so many similarities. So that level is not really so, I would say, so critical in a way, because it's very consolidated. But the patterns are more interesting. Fact is, components and patterns do share pretty much the same structure when it comes to documenting them, because they basically define how the functional behavior should be applied. Just like the pattern of the Gango 4, we need informations about when to use them, how to use them, best practices. So the usual structure to document them includes usage, anatomy, variants, best practices, behavior, content guidelines, and accessibility. Here you can see an example. This is a pattern from the ADS design system, which is called Spotlight. It's the one that enables the user to discover new features, basically. So it is pulsing, and it shows like a little card that is modal and explains to you the behavior. And you can see that there are variants, and variants are very important to every pattern, actually, and to every component, along with the best practice to choose the right variant, to provide flexibility. Otherwise, the design system becomes like a straitjacket that really doesn't follow the product in a good way, right? And then you can have behavior like this, which is an animating pulsing to basically make this pop out of the user interface. And in general, for components, because they should be in sync with the component library from the development side, they are also backed up with live demo, code snippets, in the most ideal case also access to a code sandbox where you can play around with the component live in the page. So now that we have an understanding of the components of the design system, we are in a better position to provide a definition, an operative definition, we might say. So a design system is a living set of standards, living because you need to evolve it and maintain it, released as both code and design, which provides a visual language and a framework for the construction of products of a digital ecosystem. I hope that it is clear now that we have seen the components one by one, but the accent here is on visual language and framework first, and then that it is provided as a living set of standards as code and design, okay? The main actors, which are both consumers and contributors to the design system, are designers, developers, product owners, marketing people, essentially all the stakeholders of the product. And now that we understand what it is, we can look at it through 4 different lenses or perspectives in order to better understand the impact that the design system has on a company, which is very profound. First of all, it is a language. When you define a design system, everyone has a shared language to use. So everyone understands when you're talking about a component, when you're talking about a pattern, right, in order to implement the next big feature, because everyone knows the building blocks. And also they know the principles, the values, what the company and the product has as core priorities. So it also provides a framework to answer questions that still don't have an answer, right? Because if I know that I need to prioritize, for example, efficiency over, I don't know, aesthetics, okay, maybe I already have part of my answer in order to do and inform the design that is consistent with my design system. So it provides a framework, a mindset to react to new things that must be done. And also it defines processes, of course it does, because since you have an artifact that needs a cross-functional team to be maintained and to be evolved, for sure it needs to have supporting processes that actually work hand in hand with the processes, the intertwined processes to create products. So it also shapes the way the organization works. And finally, it is a product of its own. Why I'm saying that? I'm stressing that because it's not a project, something that you can think that starts today and in 2 months it's over, okay, we're done. No, it's a living set of standards. So it is a product that must evolve, that has its own roadmap, right? And backlog. and contributors. So why use a design system? Maybe we already know something by now, but I want to stress out that a design system provides efficiency and speed. Because once it has been established, at least a setup, a basic setup, you already start to enjoy a little bit of efficiency. Because at the very least, you will have a UI kit that enables designers to iterate much faster on the design, okay? And you will have that shared language that makes everyone collaborate in a better way. And then also development can be speed up because you reuse and reuse and reuse the same components. You're not always reinventing the wheel. But also, because of the shared visions between designers and the other stakeholders, the knowledge transfer becomes much more easier. It's easy to onboard a new developer or a new designer because there are already all these like scaffolding toolkits that can help them get quickly on board and understand what you're doing. And also it provides accountability because since there is a single source of truth that you can look at to prove that what you're doing is of the right quality, right? Then everyone is accountable. And finally, again, we go back to the split effect. It fights the split effect. So you have increased consistency and user experience quality, and you have replicability of design, which is a beautiful thing. It's like when you don't need to reinvent the wheel, and the next product of the same suite of products, for example, can basically be consistently, right, coherently implemented. So it helps to manage design at scale. In the end, when design becomes bigger and bigger, a design system actually is the only way to prevent a lot of problems. So, when to use a design system then? You might ask, because, okay, so should everyone use a design system? The answer is no, but there are three main axes, three main important dimensions to look at to understand if we need a design system or not. The first one is time. The lifetime of your products, the maturity of your product is important. If you have a long lifetime, so a product that will need long maintenance, then the investment on a design system makes perfectly sense. If you have a very mature product that needs consolidation because it has become increasingly inconsistent, right? Then it is the good moment to actually start a design system. The team size. When the team size grows and maybe it's distributed, collaboration becomes increasingly difficult, right? And this is where the shared language, the shared framework, okay, sharing a process can really help. So, huge team size, yes, you should consider a design system. And then complexity of the products. If the products are, if it is a complex digital ecosystem with multiple products or even a single product but cross-channel, so you have multiple devices, multiple channels, multiple touch points, you should consider a design system. When not to use a design system, there's also the other side of the coin, right? So you shouldn't use a design system, or maybe it's not for you, when your team is small. When your team is small, when you are primarily building products for other companies, so you cannot have that consistently, reuse of your design system necessarily. When you're implementing a minimum viable product, the catch is, since design system requires for sure an upfront investment, it is related to the maturity of the product and the lifetime. So if you're building an MVP, you are in a realm of heavy uncertainty. There is no case for a design system because you don't know if your business has enough runway to justify the investment, okay? So, and there's also the danger of premature abstraction. Meaning, since you don't know what you're going to do, really, you're trying to abstract, because the design system is a powerful abstraction and generalization at the end. You're trying to abstract something when you don't really know what's your environment, what will be your needs. So you're trying to do something when the time is not ready, like. So there are also a lot of challenges, of course. They all depend on, how pessimistic you are, but actually implementing it correctly is a huge, starting point to avoid these points. But I just wanted to mention them so that, we can break the ice also with these concerns. So you can think it's time-consuming, that it can take away time from a roadmap of features. Of course, it's tricky to maintain. Designers can see it as a threat, like a straitjacket to their creativity. And it requires a lot of stakeholder support, of course, since there is an investment that must be done to sustain it. But again, the key to understand if it is for you or not is also to understand that one size doesn't fit all. So the design system, if you want to take it with its full definition, with all its bits and pieces, maybe it's not for you. Full-fledged is maybe an aspirational thing, but bits and parts of it can still really work for you. So one size doesn't fit all, but in order to really explain what I'm talking about, I wanted to take you through the Spotify case study, which is very interesting. So Spotify started as a mobile application, okay? In 2009, they launched the app, and from 2009 up to 2013, they didn't have a consistent approach to design. So inconsistencies crept into the product while they were creating more and more, of course, complex product on multiple platforms. So in 2013, they actually decided to have a huge redesign, which they called Paint It Black. And it's mostly the image that now we can recognize, right, as a Spotify identity. But it wasn't still a design system. It was a redesign, okay? So it was a style guide, if you want. And then they worked and consolidated that into a centralized design system that they called very aptly glue, bonding all together, like. And this was actually a centralized design system with a full-time team dedicated to it, okay? And this was beautiful, and this worked. But then things start to get more difficult as ubiquity happened. So they had to support a multiplicity of devices, even fridges, cars, and stuff like that. And so, under the principle of aligned autonomy, this was their principle, basically they allowed individual teams working on different projects to have their own go at the design system. And they ended up with 22 separated design systems. So this looks not ideal, right? And so they consolidated everything into a single design system, which is actually a federated system of design systems. And that's the beauty of it. It's called Encore. Let me explain what it is. So the core design system is called Encore Foundation, and it contains the pieces that actually are defining really the Spotify's experience across, let's say, agnostic of the channel or the specific application, okay? And then there are specific design systems that actually are oriented to specific channels, like web or mobile. So, but these design systems are built on top of the foundation. So when you're working on the mobile environment, let's say, you have the main reference of the mobile design system, but also you inherit everything of the foundation, okay? So they are not conflicting, they are interworking, okay? It's like an hierarchy, much more like an object-oriented hierarchy, right? Because you go from the more general to the more specific as you move to the peripheral, let's say, design systems. And in fact, there's also another level, the local design systems, which are meant to actually cater to a specific audience. So for example, on the mobile side, or for the mobile channel, they have a separate application for artists, okay? Those who actually upload the music, right? So they have a local design system for the artist's application, and one for the standard application, right? And each of these design systems actually integrate the 3 pillars that I have mentioned. So they have design, code, and documentation going hand in hand. So this is to explain you the journey that Spotify has gone through in the span of, yes, 12 years, more or less. But the very thing that I want to pass you is that this complexity grew with them organically. This is the thing. It's not that you are forcing a design system in your company because it's a buzzword and everyone should do that. The design system was born in their company and evolved in an organic way because there was the need for it. You see that there's the need for it when you are late on delivering, when your user interfaces are scattered and multiple personalities arise, right? And you have high cognitive load, and you just cannot keep the pace. So at that moment, you understand that you must do something more, and you need to change your approach. So how to start a design system? The first thing I want to tell you is that there is a spectrum of options, not just one. First of all, I want to talk about the left side, the adopt. Adopting is okay. If you are a small team, you don't have enough resources, you identify, for example, Material UI or Material U or whatever, a public design system as one that you can adopt, and it fulfills your needs. It's okay. And it's also okay because that's a starting point. You don't necessarily need to stick with it forever, but it's a starting point, and you can grow upon that. You can put additional, hierarchy levels, patterns that are built on those basic components, which cater to your own needs. So you can expand on that. And this shifts into the adapt. So this can be a journey. You go into the adapt phase where you actually recognize the limitations of the design system that you have adopted, and you start customizing it a little bit, or at least creating higher level functional patterns that using composition, right, on top of the components that are provided from the public design system in order to create your own specific patterns and designs, right? And then create. Create is an option that maybe is open if you need to implement something very specific, like an application, as I was saying. So there is like let's say a kind of bootstrapping idea, a plan in order to create a design system, which goes through, first of all, the inventory and audit, and then scoping your priorities, platform and tooling, do the visual design, understand the functional patterns that you want to use, the technical components, and then you need to disseminate and evolve. And I could go in details about these phases, okay? And actually, the presentation does go into details. But for the sake of timing, I will go just to my main, let's say, the main take that I would like to leave you with for the approach to starting a design system. You can embrace a minimum viable product approach. We have already seen that a design system is a product of its own, right? So why don't embrace a minimum viable product approach? The very important thing is to start small, because the design systems that really fail are those who try to do too much too soon, because either there is not enough understanding of what you need, so it's too soon, or either it's too much. So you want to shoot for the stars, but then, of course, reality happens and you can't make it. So you need to start small. The way to start small is to clearly identify your priorities, and I strongly suggest to basically have a look at the available public design systems in order to maybe start with one of them and understand more, and then do some work of design, enough but not too much, in order to gather agreement and consensus in the company where you work, of course, because a design system needs investments. And in order to get those investments, you need to basically pitch your idea. You need to pitch the idea of a design system to the important stakeholders in your company. So do enough work, involve other people, come up with a cool name, why not, for your design system, and create a sexy presentation and roll with it. Try to get people on board and be an advocate for it. So, but the idea is that you can start from a very, let's say, small set of patterns building on top of an adopted, design system, and then grow from there. So you already know what means evolving a product, right? If you embrace a lean strategy to evolve your product, usually you will go through the discovery phase where you actually observe that there is a need, you identify a need, so you analyze it, you go to the creatives, and they start thinking about the opportunity, maybe they get an insight, they understand, so there's the brainstorming, the thing gets designed, and then it gets implemented, it goes into the deploy finally, and then you can measure the performance, right? And then getting back in the loop, get the information, the learning back in the loop in order to improve on what you've done. Remember always that perfection is the great enemy of good, and that the change always happens incrementally. It's very rare that you do big bang and do it right the first time. So how does it change when you have a design system? First of all, when you're starting to design the new thing in the system, you need to ask yourself, okay, can I leverage an already existing pattern, something that I already have? Or if I need a new pattern, what would be the consequences on the rest of the design system? Would it create some form of inconsistency? So basically, this step is an additional step in your process to make sure that you are not breaking the design pattern in a way, and that you are going into this evolution journey, right, with continuity, not by, revolutions and disruptions in a way. And then after you have the design, you need to collaborate with the design system team in order to discuss it and basically get their point of view on the best practice to follow, how to integrate it in the design systems. I was mentioning Spotify as a case study. It's very common to have an hub and spoke or federated model for the collaboration, meaning that you have a small small team that works on the design system, that's kind of the guardian and advocate of the design system, but then all the individual product teams are able to contribute. Actually, they have a process that is institutionalized for them to feed back into the design system and collaborate with the central team in order to evolve it. And so the final step is to validate the decision and basically integrate it into the design system. Or maybe not, because maybe it's an high-level feature, that doesn't need to be, or it's a specific use case that doesn't necessarily need to go back into the design system. It's something high-level and very specific that doesn't need to go there. So in the end, the message that I really want to pass you is that design system does not only mean that you should do all that I have described. There is a wide spectrum, right? But the thing is that you should embrace systematic design. Even if you have only pieces of this architecture, if you embrace this mentality that you are actually building your system in a systematic way, with a systematic approach, that means that you have already like a design system. It's aspirational. It will happen when it has to happen, when the company reaches the right maturity level in order to be able to sustain, the investment. But in the meantime, you are already building forward to it in a way. Systematic design. And I want to leave you with a bunch of examples, so public design systems that you should have a look at, on top of the Atlassian design system that we already touched. because they're public. They're really a good way to learn what we are talking about. One that's relatively simple and straightforward is Photon from Mozilla, talking about sexy names, right? So Photon. Then we have Carbon from IBM. It's very big, it's huge, it's multi-channel, supports a variety of technology stacks. So it's really a great source of learning, if you want. And then there's Polaris by Shopify, which is also very self-contained and nice. Salesforce has Lightning, which is really a very good design system, I have to say. And then you already know material design, of course, and also its more recent incarnation, I would say, or evolution, Material U. So that is all from me for today. And maybe we have time for a few questions.
Qualcuno vuole fare una domanda? Non so se c'è qualcuno coraggioso. Te la faccio io.
Vai.
Il discorso che ne make it in Italian, no, it's easier.
Come vuoi.
Il discorso di partire da Material UI, come stiamo facendo noi, e poi adottare un tuo design system. Quanto è difficile fare questa evoluzione in un futuro?
Allora, è un'ottima domanda. Io posso parlare dalla mia esperienza, chiaramente, che magari è limitata, non è che ne ho viste 1000 di aziende che hanno intrapreso questo percorso, però direi che comunque è stata una bella palestra. Diciamo che Material UI è una bellissima base di partenza, soprattutto quando si capisce che non è un fine ma è un mezzo, ok? Perché una delle cose più pericolose è dire, ok, c'è questo Material UI, io lo devo seguire alla lettera, cioè quello che mi dice lo devo seguire alla lettera. E questo significa ingessare molto le cose, fra virgolette, e precludersi la strada, diciamo, a fare dei ragionamenti che sono più specifici sulle priorità e sui valori del nostro prodotto. Quindi quello è un primo pericolo. Diciamo, c'è questo ingessamento che purtroppo viene soprattutto dagli sviluppatori, perché diventano appassionati di una tecnologia, di una libreria, e quindi si irrigidiscono anche molto su quello che trovano, e quindi non sono molto aperti a capire che un certo livello di customizzazione sì, costa sangue talvolta, però è importante, perché è quello che riesce a rendere la user experience adattata realmente alle esigenze del prodotto, realmente alle esigenze del tuo utente finale, che non è necessariamente l'utente generalizzato di Material UI, perché Material UI non punta ad un utente specifico, punta a tutti. E quindi noi dobbiamo pensare al nostro audience prima, a quello che noi stiamo cercando di fare. Il passaggio, ecco, tra adottare e poi adattare. Allora, un primo livello molto semplice è quello di utilizzare le funzioni di teaming praticamente offerte dal design system di turno, e quindi intanto iniettargli tutti quegli elementi della nostra style guide, ok? E quindi quello è il passo base, e quello in genere costa relativamente poco. Un'altra cosa che costa relativamente poco è individuare dei pattern funzionali di livello più alto che servono al nostro applicativo, che servono al nostro prodotto, e costruirli utilizzando i componenti a disposizione del design system. Quindi ci arrivi gradualmente. Soltanto quando effettivamente vedi che le cose non sono più sufficienti, fai un passo più lungo della gamba. Quindi cresce con te.
Va bene, ci proveremo. Grazie. Grazie Emilia. Passiamo al prossimo, giusto? È già ora? Perfetto. Grazie ancora.
Grazie.